In this presentation on the Budget Amendment 2024, I will provide an overview of the significant amendments made to the 2024 budget, offering insight into the process that led to these changes. I will then address the CFT advice received and discuss the amendments that were incorporated into the budget as a result. Next, I will present the key figures, including the projected result, income, and expenditures for 2024. Additionally, I will highlight the main adjustments in capital investments and loans. While I, as the Minister of Finance, will present the major amendments, each individual minister will appear before Parliament to address specific questions related to their respective ministries. The 2024 budget was approved by Parliament at the end of March 2024. Following this approval, it was submitted to the Financial Supervision Council, CFT, in accordance with Article 12 of the Kingdom Financial Supervision Act, RFT. The CFT issued a negative advisory opinion regarding the budget. In response, the current budget amendment has been adjusted to reflect most of the recommendations provided by the CFT. This amendment incorporates more recent and updated information to provide a more accurate and realistic representation of the financial outlook for the remainder of the year. I will go into detail regarding the various adjustments suggested by the CFT and explain how these recommendations have been incorporated into this budget amendment. This will provide clarity on how we have addressed the CFT's concerns and aligned the budget to meet their expectations while ensuring it remains realistic and effective for the current year. In their advice, the CFT recommended that revenue and expenditure estimates be based on the most recent actual figures, and that interest expenses be adjusted in line with the agreements concerning the refinancing of the liquidity support loans. They also advised reviewing the feasibility of plans to implement a tourist tax, 9 million guilders, and the sale of Winier shares, 13 million guilders, and to adjust the budget accordingly. Additionally, the CFT emphasized the need for structural control over budgeted expenditures with proper justification for each item. Furthermore, the CFT advised amending the budget to ensure that from 2024 onwards, it reflects surpluses on the ordinary service of at least 0.5% of the GDP, which translates to a surplus of 16 million guilders for 2024. They also emphasized the need for sufficient justification of the proposed investments for 2024, considering both the limited execution capacity and the delayed approval of the budget. Additionally, the CFT recommended including an explanation for multi-year capital expenditures and initiating the development of a multi-year investment agenda. Finally, they advised the preparation of a multi-year liquidity plan to assess the repayment obligations and potential need for loan refinancing. The key points highlighted in red have not been incorporated into this budget amendment, and I will now provide further elaboration on the reasons behind this. Regarding the 0.5% GDP surplus, as Minister of Finance, my colleagues and I are actively exploring ways to increase revenue and manage expenses as efficiently as possible to be able to achieve higher surpluses in the coming years. However, as noted in our response to the CFT, their suggestion is a policy guideline rather than a requirement under Article 15 of the RFT, leaving this matter at the discretion of the government. Based on current information, we do not foresee a surplus of 16 million guilders and have therefore chosen not to adopt this recommendation at this time. In terms of the multi-year capital expenditure and investment agenda, I have marked this in red because we have not fully complied with CFT's advice. While we have outlined an agenda for the next 2 years, covering 2026 and 2027 with a projection of 1% of GDP in our multi-year forecast, the specific breakdown for these last 2 years have not been included in this budget. I will now proceed to discuss the amendments as presented in this draft budget, starting with the multi-annual projections. As previously mentioned, we do not foresee a surplus of 16 million guilders. However, we do expect a slight improvement in our financial result. As shown in our multi-annual projection for 2025, there is a decline in the budget amendment in comparison to the approved 2024 budget. This decline is a result of not accounting for additional revenue related to the introduction of the tourist entry tax in 2025. In our current projections, we anticipate this tax will likely be implemented in 2026. This also explains the significant increase in our expected results for 2026 onwards. Based on more recent information from our Q2 report, we can see that our revenue is slightly lagging behind expectations. This has been adjusted in our multi-annual revenue projections. As a result, we have revised our estimates, particularly for wage tax and turnover tax for this year and the coming years. Additionally, we have made adjustments to the income for the projected sale of Winair shares, which has now been removed from the 2024 projections. Similarly, the introduction of the tourist entry tax has been postponed, and we now anticipate its implementation in 2026. In order to maintain a balanced budget, we have had to reduce our expenses by 26 million guilders for 2024. These reductions are also reflected in the multi-year budgets. I will now provide more detailed insights into the specific categories where we have decreased revenue projections and then outline the areas where expenses have been adjusted accordingly. In this budget amendment, we have reduced our revenue estimate for this year by 25 million guilders. Initially, total revenues were projected at 575 million guilders. This has now been adjusted to 550 million guilders. I will now outline the major adjustments in each revenue category. In the taxes category, we see the largest decrease of 28 million guilders. This includes the removal of the 9 million guilders tourist tax, which was intended to be introduced in the second half of 2024. However, since there has been no board at the SER, there was no movement in this legislation. A 7 million guilder decrease in wage tax, a 3 million guilder reduction in income tax, and a 9 million guilder decrease in turnover tax, TOT. The decreases in tax revenue have been adjusted based on actual figures up to Q2 and updated projections for the remainder of the year. These adjustments ensure that the budget reflects more accurate and realistic expectations for revenue moving forward.
Are you SXM insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXM is cardless. Request your My SXM account today and enter the virtual office of SXM. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
SXM, yeah. Your social health insurances.
It's hurricane season. Are you prepared? Here are a few tips to keep in mind to help keep you and your family safe. The Atlantic hurricane season runs from June 1st to November 30th, with the peak occurring between mid-August and late October. This hurricane season, be sure to put together a go bag. A disaster supply kit including a flashlight, batteries, cash, first aid and supplies, medications, and copies of your critical information if you need to evacuate. This public service announcement was brought to you by the government of St. Martin. The support systems in place for students and families in our community. Joining us now is Ms. Olga Mussington from the Student Support Services Division under the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport. Ms. Mussington is here to discuss how SSSD works to provide essential support for students and families, especially in collaboration with the fire department in this upcoming Fire Prevention Month. And during emergencies and throughout the school year, there's some drills that's going to be taking place with the schools in observance of the Fire Prevention Month.
The Student Support Services plays a coordination role when it comes to school safety. And so this year, our focus was on fire safety. So it ended up being a nice partnership because the fire department is one of our partners in school safety. And so this year, our role is to assist schools as they draft their fire SOPs, which are the protocols for fire. And so we have been working with the schools on this area and helping them to prepare for their fire drills because coincidentally, Fire Prevention Month, in that same month, we also have School Safety Week. And so it ended up being a beautiful partnership.
Great. So this year, SSSD organized, I believe I saw in my notes, fire drills,
Yes.
and you got 21 schools with the support of the fire department on board. How did the schools prepare for these drills, and how is it working out?
Well, the schools started, of course, first with drafting their SOPs, their standard operating procedures.
Okay.
In that document, they would then outline what they would have to do, their meeting points that they would have to go to, what they would do at their meeting points, and so exactly how the school should be dealing with a fire. Now, we provided them with a template, but of course, they would fill in the template based on their locality because all of the different school environments are different.
Right.
And so once we approve these standard operating procedures with the support of the fire department, the schools then went into phase 2, which is then sharing that information with their school community and practicing to evacuate your whole school compound. They then had to come up with a scenario. So some schools, there was a fire in the canteen, and so the students had to evacuate the school premises. One school, there was a bushfire right outside one of the classrooms, and the classroom teacher had to signal that there is a fire, and that then triggered the alarm to evacuate the entire school. And interestingly as well is that we're working with the fire department, we want to see everything from the beginning to the evacuation and return back to the school. And so that means that they have to also call the fire department and inform that there is a fire.
Right.
And then there they ask them the relevant question. So then there's someone from the fire department in the room to see how that is going. What questions did they ask? How did they answer it? What did they say to indicate that there is a fire? What information did they give to the dispatch? And so we have a huge, probably 10, 15 firemen who comes out with the fire trucks to respond to this drill. And so the schools get a really live experience. And this is then just becomes for them to be able to improve. They get feedback from us, feedback from the firemen, and then now they're able to now incorporate that feedback into their SOPs, into future drills so that it could improve. At the end of the day, it's about safety, the well-being of the entire school community. And so the schools are taking this very serious, Cedric. And so it is going quite well.
Has there been any challenges that any of the schools might have encountered in this exercise? And of course, this serves as the learning curve. Mm-hmm. Can you identify some of the challenges that the schools might have brought up during the fire drill that they saw as areas to improve upon?
Well, yes, some persons got nervous. And also, they know that we were working with the fire department, but they didn't expect to see so many firemen. They didn't expect it to be such a live something. So it wasn't an acting. They thought they would have put on a little skit. It wasn't about that as well. And sometimes, like for instance, at one school, a student went to the bathroom, they had to evacuate, so that student ended up had to be going back in to go in a safety rescue mission. And so the school manager, the head of the set team, sent in a teacher to get a student, and then she became part of because she got caught up as well, and she didn't come back out. And so we're showing them what can happen as well based on what decisions you take in the midst of an emergency. But I think for the most part for the schools, it's just to practice a bit more, practice the whole school evacuation. Some, as I said, some thought we were going to be acting instead of a real drill, so they were going to evacuate the classrooms to the playgrounds, but in a fire you have to leave the compound.
Right.
And so we had them tell them, no, you have to do a full evacuation of compound. And then something as simple as checking to see how are you going to ensure that you have a full head count, and how quickly you're going to do that head count, because once the fire department comes, the set chair is supposed to let him know that all persons are accounted for. So the fire department would know whether they're on an extinguish mission or a rescue mission if someone is missing. And so getting those times also shorter, so that when the fire department comes, they have the information right away, so they could make a quick decision whether they're going to extinguish or they're going to do a rescue, because there are persons who are still missing on compound. And so those things were new for some schools, and so they now have to get accustomed to it and realize, listen, we have to increase our evacuation times. We have to really look to see how we communicate within the school compound that there is a fire, ensure that the school safety and emergency team set chair is aware that the fire department is notified in a decent time. And key, for those schools who are on public roads, busy roads, and who have to evacuate to these busy roads, the police department may not get there quick enough. So they have to ensure that they have persons with the correct gear and stop signs who would be able to stop traffic so their students can be able to cross the road. And so those are things that we are also working with the schools with.
How do you assess the effectiveness of the fire drills conducted in schools? Are there any metrics that SSSD uses in order to ensure its continued success?
Definitely, yes. We use their SOPs to see how, if they are evacuating, are they executing in accordance with their SOPs. You see, these SOPs form part of the bigger school safety plan. And so these are live documents. These are just not something that you draft and then you put on a shelf. These are large documents, live documents. You have to also ensure that they drill every single year. So some schools would have said, we haven't drilled for 4 years. That is now a thing of the past, because now they have to drill every single year. So to facilitate this, we also, with the help of a consultant for UNICEF the Netherlands, we work on a drill manual. So now it's their drill Bible. It helps them to understand what they need to do to prepare for a drill, what they do to execute a drill, and also how they evaluate the success of their drill, and who they need to communicate to. And so we have now provided them with a guidebook for drilling, because every single year all schools must drill. And so although we as SSSD have a drill that we do, last year it was earthquakes, this year is fire, next year it will maybe medical emergencies. And so when we execute a theme for the year, we drill on that theme. But outside of that, the schools are all required to execute drills.
It's hurricane season. Are you prepared? Here are a few tips to remember to help keep you and your family safe. 6 hours before hurricane strikes, remember, if you're not in an area that is recommended for evacuation, Plan to stay at home or where you are and let friends and family know where you're located. Close storm shutters and stay away from windows. Flying glass from broken windows could injure you. Turn your refrigerator or freezer to the coldest setting and only open it when necessary. If you lose power, food will last longer. Keep a thermometer in the refrigerator to be able to check the food temperature when the power is restored. For the latest weather updates and emergency instructions, turn on your TV and/or radio and visit stmartingov.org. This hurricane season, remember, it only takes one. This public service announcement was brought to you by the government of St. Martin.
SXM, your social and health insurance. SXM, your social and health insurance.
Are you SXV insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXV is cardless. Request your My SXV account today and enter the virtual office of SXV. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
SXV, yeah, your social and health insurances.
Prime Minister said about GB that a loan of 42 million was requested from the Netherlands, and that was incorporated in the budget for 2024. How does that work if the negotiations for the conditions for the loan will come later? So how he said that it would be incorporated, and later he would sit with the Netherlands to talk about the interest rate.
I can't answer in terms of what the Prime Minister said in reference to later. What I do know is that based on the budget amendment, this is very key. We have three things specifically that needs the attention. The prison is one of them. The GEBE and the three generators amounting to approximately 75 million guilders, and also mental health foundation. So those things are definitely impacted based on Budget Amendment 2024.
Okay. Thank you, Minister.
Then the Enya question, you said that this is all due to a long-standing problem with the supervisory role of the central bank. There are a number of cases from people on St. Martin against local banks, and those might have been prevented, and the auction of properties and giving mortgages to people who were already had mortgages before and were not able to pay it, and it was the property was auctioned off, still getting mortgages from banks. What can you do, or what can government do to improve the supervisory role of the central bank, and also complaints and questions from people on St. Martin to the central bank for those to be answered?
Thank you again for your question. I think those concerns, as well as any other concern that persons may have towards the central bank, should be therefore brought forward to the minister in question, so that we can definitely look into these matters as a government to see how we can mitigate any issues that persons may have with, whether it's mortgages, you name it, with whatever issues that they may have with banks on St. Martin. And I think we can only do so once we officially know the complaints, officially know what the issues are, and then we can bring them up with the central bank and see how we can definitely mitigate. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Emily?
So first, a clarification question. So regarding the 42 million that's in the budget amendment, does that mean that government is borrowing the money from the Netherlands? And is that an indication that GB then is not in a financial situation where it can go on the market to secure that loan on its own financial strengths basis?
The answer to your question, Mr. Lee, is yes. We are borrowing the 42 million, and GB is not in a financial position to handle this matter on their own.
Okay. My question for you is the General Audit Chamber recently published a report, and they mentioned that they found unclear policies which can lead to an inconsistent treatment regarding assessments that are issued. What's the ministry's thoughts on the report, and do you have a plan of action to address the points that were brought up in their report?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Lee. I briefly looked at the General Audit Chamber's report. I haven't gone into much detail understanding everything that was at play at the moment, but I will definitely dive into it more so that I can come back to you with a proper answer as to what we plan to do about these assessments in question.